the general part of my question was to ask you about the demand for backhaul and middle haul, and what is going to be needed in terms of infrastructure and technologies to handle backhaul, the backhaul part of it. And I guess the specific part of my question is, assuming that the need for backhaul is great, let's assume that the answer is yes. What are the prospects for backhaul via lower latency satellite in, say, low or medium Earth orbit?
Yes.
Well, backhaul clearly is a choke point, especially where we're sitting right now. It's not so much the last mile spectrum, it is a choke point at the base station, which is the backhaul problem. And one very illuminating fact is that only 10% of the cell sites in this country have fiber to the tower. And we are sitting at a wireless conference, but we all know when we have to carry gigabits of traffic from a cell site, fiber is the most optimal solution, but it's only available in 10% of the places. Clearly, there are other ways to do it, which is microwave and Ethernet over copper, which kind of alleviates the problem. But as our smartphones become smarter, and one very telling statistic is that when Clearwire switched on in Baltimore, their network, the average smartphone user were using 10 times the bandwidth compared to a regular cell phone user. And all this the traffic has to be carried through, so backhaul is a huge bottleneck. And the solutions there is a combination of fiber and kind of more advanced microwave techniques.
I can comment on our network design. The vast majority of our cell sites will have a fiber backhaul, and we'll have a minority using microwave link. But in dense urban and urban areas, we'll have fiber backhaul to cope with the usage we expect.
Dana, what are you assuming with all these millions of link systems, how the information is getting into and out of core network?
Well, that's actually a huge problem for us, even in New York. So a lot of people assume that New York City is the most wired place in the country, but and while it is true in some measures, it's absolutely not true for end users. And we have huge amounts of fiber running under the roads in New York City, but we effectively operate as an end user subscriber to a few different ISPs, and we don't have access to fiber, for example, except through FiOS. And so I think that at least for community uses, there's actually a huge need for alternative connection options, ones that don't require a huge upfront cost. I think that we're doing some research for you to be able to get access to fiber in Manhattan through Empire Telecom, which is a Verizon subsidiary that manages the laying fiber in New York, in Manhattan. I don't know if they do the other boroughs, but they definitely do Manhattan. You requires a $200,000 deposit just to start the discussion about opening up the streets. And I forget what the price point per mile is, but it's pretty equivalent. And so the cost of even building out your own network like that is prohibitively expensive, or even just getting access to networks like that is prohibitively expensive for any sort of anything else other than a sort of top-down, well-funded player in the market. We have problems because we actually have deployments in parks and public spaces where there is no broadband available. There's barely DSL. There's no cable system. FiOS doesn't exist and won't ever exist. And mostly it's just because we aren't we're running our networks in places that are not registered as residences or official businesses such that that regulations require Verizon to provide service. We've done some some cellular backhaul, which is terrible in terms of speed and latency, and we've done a little bit of WiMAX and pre-WiMAX backhaul through TowerStream and through Rainbow networks, and those are great, but they're expensive too. The costs are 3 to 10x what a traditional business wireline would cost. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for all sorts of new types of of backhaul to be made available, and we're just hoping someone else is going to take up the charge on the backhaul side.
Sandeep, do you see an opportunity here for some technical breakthrough in the backhaul? I mean, we've seen people enhancing radio systems, pushing more and more bits through the air, but it seems that we're, as you say, and Dana, the bottleneck now is someplace else. Will technology help?
Well, it has been helping, short of fiber, which really is the holy grail, but again, it only makes sense for at this point for dense urban areas. The microwave technology has moved up quite a bit in terms of having big microwave pipes at these sites. And there are things like Ethernet over copper. There are a bunch of companies which basically they bonded Ethernet. So you join 4 or 5 twisted pairs and create a bigger pipe out of it, which could be a D1 or a DS1. So those kind of technologies are definitely there to ameliorate the pain. But that clearly is a huge choke point, and short of fiber being everywhere, the wireless technologies will have to step up, as they have in the past.
The EBITDA margins of service providers were mentioned by Frank. One reason for these high margins, a small reason maybe, is that the service providers in the US charge for all incoming international calls the same long distance rate as they charge for any outgoing calls. And that's the only country I know. It's very frustrating for people who travel overseas quite a bit and still use their GSM phones. So is there, what's the reason? Is there any backlash? Is there anything to change that in the future? Are you aware of this, first of all?
There is technology, regulatory offering called special access, which if you remember back when AOL was cranking up, you got these discs, and they had put the disc in, and then you'd pick a local phone number, and you'd call that local phone number, and then you'd be on the internet. So special access is now in at least 60 countries, and what you'll see happen is it'll be 2 cents per minute of use to go do the calls you're talking about, because it won't be the $3 or $4 per minute of use that you're talking about. They'll go over the internet.
But that's not my question.
So if
you said what was going to change.
If you're talking about international roaming, it's not regulated. I was running international roaming for Vodafone, with the largest player in that field. The only part in the world where it's regulated, it's Europe, because the EU wants to eliminate roaming across member states in Europe, so that you can have your subscription in the UK, you travel to Germany, you make a call back to the UK or in Germany, and you pay domestic price. So the EU is establishing caps that are reduced year after year to eliminate international roaming altogether. But when you are in the US or in any other country for that matter, and you are a carrier, you try and maximize your international roaming revenues. So you look at it country by country, and you look at the balance of traffic. If you are receiving more traffic than you are sending to that country, you try and extract a higher price. And that's a very profitable business in the US and in other countries.
Even if you look domestically, that's how the rural carriers make their money. Because when all of us kind of go through the middle of nowhere and we want signal, it's the rural carrier kind of fronting all the expense, and they charge a pretty penny for that. So even domestically, it's the same.
So that will continue for the foreseeable future. It doesn't happen overseas.
For the rural carriers, as they indicated, we are changing that for the first time in the country. We've signed our first agreements with Cellular South, Southern Illinois Wireless, Open Range, to establish a reciprocal roaming arrangement. So we will allow our customers to roam in those on those rural networks at a single digit dollar per gigabyte, and themselves they will roam on our network at the same rate.